me.
Absolutely. Any friend of Trenton is a friend of mine. So
I feel the same way. He and Caitlin are so fantastic.
they're amazing people. How did you meet them?
Through an online fitness community called SweatNet that I partner with.
Okay.
I don't know how to use Zoom.
Are you okay?
I was homeschooling my kids through that part of the pandemic, so we never had
Mm.
to really learn this. I feel like I'm behind all of everybody. Um, we partner with SweatNet, which is an online fitness community that out of Pittsburgh.
Okay.
And so they promoted one of my deliveries, and I think Caitlin caught wind of that through them.
Okay.
And then there's some, I love having them come out to the farm and play and pick up meat.
No, absolutely. So, um, you know, Trenton told me a little bit about you. I think, do you have like a medical background and then you transition out of that into regenerative farming?
Right. So it wasn't a direct transition. I'm a naturopathic physician. I had a practice in California,
Okay.
which was a family practice, seeing patients of all ages, working to address the root cause of their dis-ease. And with, prevention is key in naturopathic medicine. So seeing all the little kids and helping make sure that they are set up for success, and seeing the people with the aches and the pains and my doctor says I have to be on this medication for the rest of my life, or my doctor says the only
I think I lost
finally
you.
come to see you. But I had small kids. Are we good?
You're back now. Yeah.
Let me check which
It,
network I'm on.
it could be, it's raining here, but let me see. Let me
Isn't
go.
it funny how that matters?
I don't even know if it really matters. I don't know if I just say that because it's a thing.
It seems like it shouldn't
It shouldn't
matter,
matter,
but it
right? We're in,
definitely seems like it does. And
yeah.
we're wired now. We're on FiOS technically, but it still seems like the wind is blowing and we don't have good service.
Yeah. If the clouds are just right, you don't get any service out here.
Um, I had a practice in California. I loved being in clinical practice, but I wasn't home with my kids really at all. Somebody else was making their meals and taking them to the park, and I would be giving them a bath in the evening and calling the lab at the same time to get, reports back on patients. And that wasn't the kind of mom that I wanted to be. So when I was pregnant with my third, I made the decision to sell that practice and transition to being home with the kids more. The other piece was, even though I really loved clinical practice, I was seeing primarily the demographic seeking alternative medicine at that time was women over 40, men over 50 with some kind of chronic ailment. That's the biggest group. And so I would be treating these people and we would be making huge progress. They'd be feeling so much better. And then I would go home and take my kids to the park and see all of these children engaging in activities that were going to set them up to be even worse off than the people that I had just spent 60 hours that week working with, trying to fix. So I wanted to see if I could be home with the kids more and bring in an education piece.
Yeah.
Instead, I just got really, really busy with the kids. We moved out into an RV and did full-time traveling for a while. Got sick of this work schedule my husband had that had him away from us for 2 weeks at a time. Looked for a new job for him in a place where we could see him every day. So he still works 7 12-hour shifts, but he comes home at the end of each of those shifts, which was not the case before. That brought us to Pennsylvania. Looking for a place to live, we stumbled on an advertisement for the farm, and I saw in it the opportunity to grow the food that I wished my patients had access to and that I wanted my kids to be eating.
Wow.
So we went for it.
That's a big transition. So the family practice that you sold, that was your parents, I'm assuming?
No, that was my practice.
Oh, it was your practice. Okay. I apologize.
Yeah, that was my naturopathic practice in California. And that's still there in Bakersfield.
Okay.
Which is where we were.
That's wild. That's a big step to move across the country like that. Do you have any experience in farming or with animals, agriculture, or anything like that?
None at all.
Wow.
Prior to this, I had cats and basil plants, the ones that you buy at Trader Joe's. We had a dog for a short while. that was really it. I had not held a chicken until the morning that we went and picked up our first flock of 30.
Wow.
I had not held a lamb until we, brought ours home. I'd never milked a cow until I had cows in my field to milk. I remember when my son was little, like, 9 months old, having a conversation with a friend that I wanted him to catch frogs and pick up worms and play with snails, but I didn't know how to do any of that.
Mm.
And even as a naturopathic doctor who is supposed to know all these natural things, I didn't know where the lines were about putting those slugs in his mouth. So no, I did not grow. I grew up in the suburbs of Southern California, eating chicken breasts and ground beef.
Mm.
Um, didn't know anything about farming.
Yeah, that's a big step. So, were y'all financially secured, or was it a big leap for y'all when you made the move? Yeah.
Yeah, yep. We are in a fortunate position to have the support of family.
Mm.
The kids do not have college funds anymore.
You know that
uh,
I think a lot of people feel the same way and want to do the same thing or similar things that you're doing, but it's a big leap of faith. I talk about it with my wife all the time. We take our kids to daycare still, and it feels like the most unnatural thing to do. I think we're the only species that does that. We take our kids somewhere for some random people to watch them while we work, and they're not random people, right? They're great. They're fantastic. Our kids love them, but driving there, it feels like I'm in a matrix. It just feels unnatural. I have to drop my kids. My kids don't really want to be there. So I'm like trying to figure out how to transition out of that. And
yeah,
I feel like a lot of people are. I don't know if it's because I'm curating my Instagram feed to be around more people like that and more people talking about it, or if it's just kind of becoming more accepting of where people are like, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't know if you're seeing kind of the same thing.
I think it's probably both. I think you're curating it, but there's more of it
Yeah, for
for sure.
sure. Yeah.
Um, Even just in the time when we've been here 3 years, we were on the road for 2 years, so it's been about 5 years. When we started full-time RVing, there were a lot of people who had already been on the road for a long time, but there are a lot more people now
Mm.
just in the last 5 years who have quit the suburbs
Yeah.
in exchange for more family time and travel and nature.
Yeah, and also this belief of you need to have money. When I was growing up, that was the key to happiness was having a really good job and making money, and that was the you're set. And I also believe that there's this transition to a new way of life almost or a new way of thinking to really find happiness is to be around your family and doing something that you enjoy and that's meaningful and that's beneficial to your community, and that may not make you rich, but it's fulfilling in life. And I think that's kind
Right.
of like you followed your journey or you followed your passion, and that's where led you here, and that's very inspirational.
Yes. Yeah. I think that you're right. There's a lot less, a lot fewer people who are willing to just go work for the man and
Mm,
grind in order to pay the bills. Although that happens, there's plenty of that too.
right.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's not wrong too. I don't ever want to come off like I'm being arrogant. Like that's like the wrong way to live. Like some people can
Mhm.
be really happy going and working 9 to 5, and I was for a long time, but it doesn't fulfill me anymore. It doesn't really
Yeah.
make me happy, you know.
Yeah. 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 So you're doing some, are you still going to school for,
Unfortunately,
what were you,
yes. Yeah, so I'm going to school for industrial engineering, and I'll be done in May. Um,
congratulations.
so I am so glad to be done. I told my wife when I get my degree, I'm going to rip it up, shred it, because it really means. No, I thought it meant something, you know, but it really doesn't mean anything for me. You know.
That's another real interesting shift that's happening, right? When we were young, um, a bachelor's degree was an important point of entry to the world of employment.
Mm,
And there's still a discrepancy between without a degree, the jobs you have access to, and the jobs you have access to with a degree, right? But my friends who don't have degrees or who have vocational training, make a whole lot more money than I ever made with my doctorate.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that we are thankfully, as a society, swinging back around to seeing the value in vocations, vocational training, and maybe returning college to the academics. Like that's the difference between academics and research and practical applications of things. And the one, and not necessarily everybody needs that 4-year degree
Yeah.
in
No,
order to be and an important part of society.
that's so interesting. When I was going to school, my dad worked. He owned his own HVAC business, so he was a technician. He did residential work, new installs, and then he also did service calls. So people would call him. He'd fix, ACs, fridges,
Yeah,
all that kind of stuff, and he made killer money doing it. But it was kind of like a stigma around doing
right.
that kind of work then. And it was kind of,
Yeah,
and my even my dad talked about it, like, you don't want to do this when you grow up. You need to go to school, that way you don't have to do this. And it's hard work, it's backbreaking work. But looking back at it, I'm like, man, I should have just stayed with my dad and worked with him. I could have took over his business, could have made it into something else bigger. And I think society, like you mentioned, society as a whole is kind of like, hey, we need these people to do these trades that no one else really knows how to do anymore.
right.
Wow.
Yeah. I think you touched on something there with it is so physical
Mm,
that once you've been doing any of the physical work for 20 or 40 years, you really don't want your kids to have to.
no.
And if you can put them in a position where they can have what looked like a comfortable desk job,
Right.
right? So I think that was fueling some of this push, but now we're seeing that that's not really the answer.
Yeah. No, it's interesting to see, and now I'm contemplating on, what I need to tell my kids, and I don't know if you are in the same struggle. Like, school's important, education, academics is very important, but I don't want to confine them into that educational system. Like, you have to do this in order to be successful, because I have family members that barely are barely graduated high school, are dyslexic, and they make a ton of money, delivering rock and building roads and stuff like that. So how do you balance it with your kids?
I think I'm having the same conversations in my head as I'm out there, moving animals and scooping poop and living my dream on the farm. I have one who's very academic and is excited already at 9, excited to go to college
Hmm.
and will do well in the world of academia. I have one who really will thrive in something vocational, and one who could go either which way. And I think even though my husband and I both, like you said, we all value education, but what is education really? I didn't learn, I went to a lot of school.
Yeah.
I didn't learn a whole lot in school.
Yeah. Also, the idea of an education system that's a template for everyone is wild to me. I didn't do very well in school. I was concentrated on girls and sports, and it just didn't really interest me. But now, like, I'm get obsessed with things that are, really, like regenerative farming, uh, video creation and stuff like that, or the science behind why sleep is important. I get really obsessed on certain topics, and I imagine there's a course every other kid feels the same way, that sometimes they just don't want to learn what's being taught, and there's some other things that would be more beneficial for them.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see what things are like, 10 years from now.
yeah,
I think
like,
we're,
I always say that there's going to be like a YouTube university, and you won't even need like a structured institution anymore. You can just go online and watch 40 hours of this YouTube series and become certified in it.
I can get a little certificate. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
No, I mean, that's out there
absolutely. So,
already in some
so,
sense.
so when you took over the farm, did you know about regenerative ranching? Did you know about regenerative farming at that time?
So I knew, like through life, growing up in Southern California, you're exposed to lots of the environmental plight, right? About the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. I became a vegetarian in 6th grade because of industrial agriculture and the inhumane treatment of animals. I gave that up by 8th grade because of balancing that with human interactions. I did a lot of international travel and wanted to be a gracious guest and wanted to experience cultures.
Right.
But I was aware of kind of the hard, sticky parts of the food production system. And then went on to naturopathic medical school and got really entrenched in the nutritional side of industrial agriculture, right? What's on the Cheerios, what's not in the Cheerios, what is in the Cheerios that shouldn't be. In my first year of practice in Bakersfield, one of my patients gave me a book by Joel Salatin, Everything I Want to Do is Illegal. And that was to some of the other ways that we could be raising food. That it didn't have to look like the CAFOs, that it didn't have to rape and pillage all of the topsoil, leaving behind completely depleted land with no minerals. There's no minerals left in your vegetables because there's no minerals there, except the ones that we add in, that we distill from petrochemical processes, all of that type of stuff. So it just planted a seed of, there is another option. I wasn't thinking, gosh, I want to go and do all that.
Right.
But I would counsel my patients as to what they should be looking for in the food that they were eating. And they would ask, great, where can I find it? I don't know. When you find out, would you let me know?
Yeah, in California, I can imagine it's kind of slim pickings, huh?
Well, you would think that we would have access to all the things in California. We produce so much of the nation's food out there. But where we were in feedlot country, not too far off that I-5 corridor. And I knew that was not the answer. If we're looking at human nutrition, you can't separate that from the health of the earth or the health of the communities or the social justice side, the human suffering side of the labor. Right. So I knew the system was broken on all of the levels. And I had read one book that was like, there is a better way to do this, probably. Somewhere someone's doing it better. When Alex found this property, he just made some kind of a joke about something we could do on all the acreage. And he truly was not thinking, hey, let's go have a farm. But I immediately flipped back to that Joel Salatin book and knew that I could do something here to grow food in a responsible way that was going to be nutrient dense, that was going to be ethical for the land, for the animals, for the workers, all throughout the chain, for the community. And so we thought about it for a minute and went for it.
That's awesome. I don't want to put you on the spot here, but there's 15 different definitions for regenerative agriculture. You talk to one person, it means one thing. You talk to a different, even culturally, you talk to like Native Americans, they got a different definition for it. How would you define regenerative agriculture?
Yeah, right. It is interesting and it's so multifaceted because the systems are so interconnected. We are affecting change on a lot of levels. And for me, that word regenerative does fit in so many places. So if we zoom way in, we're looking at regenerating the microbiota of the soil, increasing the biodiversity of the various plants and fungi and microbes in the topsoil, regenerating, creating more of the topsoil itself, the diversity of plants on that, of the birds and the bugs that come to visit it, right? The soil's water holding capacity, its ability to capture carbon, its ability to filter, for plants to grow there that can filter toxicity just out of the environment in general, right? All of this, and other people can speak to it so much better than me. But also regenerating the community,
Mm.
Local food production is a food security issue. We saw this with COVID. When one processing plant goes down, there's no meat on the shelves anymore.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
If you want our country to be able to eat safely, reliably, no matter what happens, the food has to be being produced in the places it's going to be consumed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the community needs to be able to come together around that. So it's been really fun bringing like minds. A lot of our customers felt really alone out here because they didn't have other people who ate like they did, or they didn't think they knew other people who shared the values of ethical food, clean food, healthy food, environmentally friendly food. And they're able to come together to meet each other at our meat pickups and feel like, oh, there's somebody else who feels the way that I do about this. Regenerating human health. Your body literally regenerates itself, and it does it using the building blocks that you give it in your food, right? You're going to take a protein and break that out into its amino acids, fine. But you're going to take a fat and pretty much incorporate that into the cell membrane. And if that's a really bad for you fat, that's what your cells are going to be made of.
Mm. There's a lot to unpack there. And I think that's why it's so difficult to really define what regenerative agriculture is. And maybe that's why everyone has, because it's not just like one thing. It encompasses so many things that you touched on. So
Yeah.
it's difficult just to put it in this little box for people to understand, because without having these type of long form conversations, you can't eloquently say it in a sentence, or you can't capture it on an Instagram post. It has to be explained and talked through and hit on all those points.
Right. As a producer, you kind of need a buzzword
Yeah.
that's going to reach the people who are looking for you.
Right.
Right. And so for kind of where we are in the country, regenerative agriculture, it's, as you know, it's having a little bit of a heyday. It is absolutely going to end up greenwashed and go the way of organic and all those other things. It's not the perfect word, but it's enough of a word to make people say, huh, either that's what I'm looking for, or what is that? Oh, that sounds good.
Right.
And so that's why we kind of stick with that
When you
label.
right. When you purchased your land, how was the health of the soil? Did you look into that? Was it a concern for you? Did you have a lot of work ahead of you? What kind of thoughts did you put into that?
Yeah, so they had raised Arabian horses on this property, and it had been probably 15 years or more since any animals were actually on the land. But what is our pasture had been used for cropping grains by another neighbor, alternately hay, corn, I don't know what all. It had also been a while since that had been used that way. So I wasn't worried about necessarily any pesticide residues or that kind of thing, but the plants were really sparse on it. There was a lot of briar, a lot of bramble. When we first cut hay that first season, the hay bales were full of multiflora rose, which they don't have that out in Texas.
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
I didn't eat that plant until I came out here. We've got lots of pokey plants in the Southwest, right?
Right.
Multiflora rose is its own beast. Pokey thorns. And so you'd go to grab a hay bale and just get bloody.
Wow.
Because there was so much of this. And now you can go rolling through the hay fields. They're lush, they're green. We still have a ways to go. But the change that has happened in the 3 years that we've been here is just remarkable.
Wow. Just 3 years, huh?
Yeah. Yep.
So what are some of the things that you incorporated when you first purchased the land with the animals and that kind of thing?
Right. We moved in January 2020, and I told myself and my family that we would not be getting any animals until after the spring, when we could see the land and get a sense of things. So by February, we had 30 chickens.
Hell yeah.
I think by the end of February, we had 4 hogs. In March, we brought home our first cattle and our first sheep.
Well, that was perfect.
We raised meat chickens and ducks that summer. Brought home some more cows.
That quick.
Right now so 3 years in, We're at 300 laying hens. We have 50 something sheep on the ground right now because we just had 30 lambs. I've got 12 cattle. We use them mostly for milking. Um, we'll only do 750 broiler chickens this year. We did 1,500 last year.
Oh,
We did 20 some hogs last year.
wow.
So we're still small, but we're growing.
No, that doesn't seem small. That's a lot of activity. Are
It's a
y'all?
lot for one person.
Yeah. Are you? I was going to ask you. So, what's the process look like for, taking care of the chickens? Are you doing this by yourself? Are you packaging the meat? What does that look like?
Okay, so all of the daily farm chores and stuff has mostly been me. I'm working on getting really good help.
Hmm.
Um, that's its own thing. When you're starting off like this, there's the daily chores, there's the projecty stuff, right? You want to improve your infrastructure, but no one's going to die if you don't get the infrastructure done, whereas someone's going to die if you don't feed and water. So first you have to do all of the feeding and the watering and the daily moving. And then you have to work on the project stuff, but there's also the business side because if there's not a business, there can't be a farm,
Right.
right? We can't be here if we're not making it all work. So there's the connecting with customers and the putting orders together and the sending the emails and the bookkeeping and the marketing and all of that. So the daily chores, of course, happen here. Our meat processing is done by family-run processors in the area under USDA inspection.
Okay.
And that's so one of the real privileges of farming the way that we do is that I feel good about it from end to end.
Hmm.
Our grain, so we do 100% grass on our lamb, beef, and veal, but the chicken, turkey, eggs, pork all need grain inputs. We're able to get those from a farm that's within our 500-mile bioregion, certified organic feed. They use legitimate regenerative practices. You would be interested possibly in talking with Stonehouse Grain.
Heck yeah. Yeah.
They, cover cropping. They're building soil organic matter as they go. They're not spraying with nasty stuff. They've also helped convert a lot of the farms in their area from conventional to organic.
Wow.
They added a non-GMO line, which is that first step when you're transitional organic, so that these farms would have a sales channel. And I just got an email recently saying the non-GMO lines are going away because these farms are now all certified organic.
Holy cow.
And so I know that the grain inputs, which is one of the hard parts if you're trying to do regenerative farming, having to bring grain in when growth of grain is an extractive process can be a tricky thing. And when you know that the agriculture industry in general is one where it's a risky job with a lot of underpaid, undercared for laborers,
Mm-hmm.
right? But with these farms, I'm not concerned that their workers are not being taken care of or are being exposed to all kinds of chemicals or that their kids are living in the rough conditions that I saw in the agricultural industry in California, right? This is a small company that I can feel really good about working with for our grain inputs. And then on the other side of things, when we take our animals to the processor, these are family-run facilities where everyone's having a good time. They're clean, they're bright, they're happy to be there. They're not hiring 13-year-olds to clean the meat packing equipment overnight like we're seeing in the headlines right now.
Yeah.
Which, no question, those kids are doing it because they need to, because their families need that money to survive, which is part of the broken American system that we
No.
kind of touched on, right, with childcare and
Right.
employment, education.
Yep.
I don't fault those kids at all. I fault the entire system. But again, during COVID, we saw what a hotbed, how unsafe those facilities are, how fast disease spreads through. We know that they are unclean because of how much contamination there is in our meat, right? How many
Right.
recalls were there just this month because of meat of metal or glass, or
Every day
let's
you
not
see
even
it.
talk about bacteria and fluids and human pieces that end up in there, right? So I feel really good about the grain inputs. I feel really good about where the animals go. Again, they're all going to be paid a living wage, and they're people who are doing jobs they want to be doing. They take a lot of pride in it, and supporting, small business, keeping things local, regenerating the local community, the local economy, and then that meat comes back and we distribute it to our customers.
That's awesome. So you handle all the, like, the marketing and all that stuff by yourself? That's a
Yes,
lot of work.
I'm learning. Steep learning curves.
Is social media kicking your butt?
I don't think that I engage in it deeply enough to allow it to do that. My butt is so kicked.
It's a lot to manage with social media because I don't know what all platforms you on, but it's a lot. Just posting weekly to Instagram. I don't know if you do TikTok and all that stuff, but I mean Instagram and Facebook alone are a lot to deal with.
Yes, I had not been on social media for a few years before we started the farm, but I knew that people would eventually be Googling for us, and I wanted some proof that we existed.
Right.
So Instagram cross posts to Facebook, and that's about the extent of what I do at this time. And then we have an email newsletter, and that's how we directly communicate with our customers and let them know what's going on the farm. And
That's great.
that's the best return, is definitely that. But it's fun being out in the community and running into somebody who says, "Oh, I saw that your sheep are out behind your house right now. That looks so fun." Or, "Gosh, I watched you chase those pigs around."
Yeah.
Yeah,
Are y'all looking into getting a website?
we have a
Oh,
website.
you do have a website. Okay.
Yes, yeah, the website, and that's where people place their orders
Okay.
to come and pick up at the farm or at our different drop locations.
Did you do that by yourself too?
Yes, we're on
Woo!
our second one now, and this one is fairly done for you.
Okay.
They've got it. It is very farm friendly,
Oh, that's cool.
allowing us to sell meat by the pound and to have different drop locations, and all of that is built into it.
Oh, that's cool. We just
Yeah,
built a website for a little business that we're doing. What host provider are you using?
that's Gray's Cart.
Gray's Cart. Okay. Haven't heard of
Yeah.
that one. But I guess that's
If you
more
go to
geared towards
Seven Sons Farm,
Okay.
Seven Sons, this is one of their businesses.
Okay.
They originally built it to serve their farm, and now it's a great asset
That's
for
awesome.
farm sector. Yeah.
Yeah. Now you talk about building the community, and I think that's very important with what regenerative agriculture has to offer because a lot of the naysayers that are, I don't want to say against regenerative agriculture, but that doubt the benefits from it, saying that regenerative agriculture, you can't feed our country with it. And hearing the greats, I guess the prominent ranchers like Will Harris talk about it, or Taylor Collins from Rome Ranch. They always talk about it's about providing for our community. It's not about feeding, the country. It's about providing for our community, and I think that's where, as everything has gotten to in America, where it's so easy to buy stuff off Amazon and get it from New York to Texas in one day. We expect that with our food, and that I don't think it's supposed to be that way.
I really strongly agree with you there. I mean, we still eat bananas that are shipped in from who knows where,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Avocados. But what can be produced locally really ought to be. And once upon a time, this country had butcher shops everywhere. And that's not the case anymore.
Mm-mm.
Right? We are lucky that we have access within an hour and a half to a USDA facility. And there are places where you have to go 3 or 4 hours for that. There's a lot of legal stuff that plays into that. It is really hard to be a small farm. It's hard to be a small business, period, right? But there are so many federal oversights that actually came into play when our food system started getting dirty.
Mm.
When we had that mass movement into the cities, when we took cows and put them next to distilleries and started feeding the cows the distiller's grain, and the cows developed gastric ulcers and all kinds of illness because of the crowded conditions and the poor food that they were eating. It was at a point where the cows were literally being suspended by slings in order to be milked.
Wow.
And their milk was of so poor quality that it was being adulterated with chalk in order to make it thicker and whiter.
Damn.
And then being shipped out. It was that time when we divorced food production from locality that we had to bring in federal oversight because the food quality was making people sick. And we need to get back to where we were before that. I think we have the infrastructure where you could produce the food that New York City needs within a 2-hour drive of New York City.
Absolutely.
Right? At least as far as the heavy hitters, the things that are going to have the biggest impact on the soil, the earth, on the land, as well as on human nutrition.
No, I agree. When you, oh dang, I lost my train of thought here. Oh, okay. You mentioned government oversight, and that had me curious. In the last 3 years, have you seen any favorable, I guess, bills or support when it comes to the government and regenerative agriculture? Because in the news, and again, I'm curating my feed, so I'm seeing more and more support from government officials. But are y'all actually seeing that, at the farm level?
I don't know.
No.
I keep my head down. I got a lot going on. I will say there are programs out there that look friendly and that are helpful. The National Resource Conservation Services has like cost sharing programs in place to help farmers do things like create a rotational grazing system. So if you have somebody on 100 acres or on 1,000 acres that is just letting their beef cattle go everywhere, NRCS can help them on a funding side to divide that now into 12 different paddocks, and then they can move their cows. And that simple change is going to be enough to improve the soil, the water, the nutritional density of the meat, the health of the animals, all of that. And that farmer might need the technical guidance coming from this federal organization,
Right.
in order to put that into place. As far as things like carbon credits and all of that, I don't know.
Yeah.
Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund, are you familiar with them?
No, I'm not.
That's a great organization that is doing work on the level of protecting farms and consumers from the overstepping.
Oh.
They're fighting fights like raw butter is illegal. Nobody has ever died from raw butter.
Damn.
There's no reason that it should be illegal.
No.
SWAT teams do show up on farms and raid them.
Really?
Oh yeah,
Holy.
it happens.
Wow.
And it's absolute absurdity. The fights, the legal fights that are going on are power battles. They're not safety battles. When you're producing food locally, when you know your customers' faces and families and they know you, I'm never going to intentionally sell an adulterated product because my reputation is on the line, right? These are my friends. My customers are my friends. Whereas we know the product in the grocery store is adulterated and it's allowed to be. What is the percentage of your cereal that could be rat poop?
Yeah. You don't even know. Yeah, you don't even know.
Never gonna fly.
Right.
You're never gonna fly with that on a small farm. So when you're working on that hyper local level, the safety is built in because we care so much more.
Right.
And yet these government regulations that really matter when you're at this divorced, separated thing still have to apply to us, and they can apply to us in a way that really is handicapping. So we're not certified organic. Probably we won't ever be, mostly because of the level of bookkeeping required. I just don't have the capacity to keep those kinds of records at this season, and I don't see that. But any of my customers can come and walk the whole farm with me and see everything that we're doing. Whereas the feed that we buy is certified organic, and I know the farm that we're getting it from, but if I didn't, I would rely on that certification for one level of imperfect, but it's the protection that I can get to hope that I'm getting what I think that I'm getting, right? So the further away you get, the more that kind of thing matters.
Right. I think a lot of regenerative farmers aren't certified organic because certified organic is almost cheap talk now, right?
it's it's not what it used to be.
Right.
Um, and it's not necessarily the end goal. So we don't use any pesticides, chemicals. Um, we use all organic principles, but there are things that are allowed in organics that we wouldn't use. And our goal here is much bigger and broader than just keeping the Roundup off of it.
Right.
Right.
I think
So it's
certified
not
or
worth it.
I think certified organic. I've heard some people talk about how it's just a money grab now because there's so many loopholes in that certification that allows you to use pesticides and herbicides in it. And I don't know all the details too much, but I've heard from experts in the industry that there's so many loopholes in it that you could have a certified organic lot or plot of food
Right.
right next to one that's being heavily processed and heavily fertilized with chemicals. So you're obviously going to get overspray in this lot right here. So it's almost like, what who how do you define certified organic and what does the process look like at this place compared to another place?
I think we know that it's important because there are still safeguards there.
Mm-hmm.
We also know that it's imperfect, but the further away that you get from your food, the more important it is, right?
Right.
So that organic apple might be grown within vicinity of a glyphosate sprayed cornfield. I don't know. There are rules about how close things can be in upwind and downwind, and I don't know what those are. But it's still going to be better than the one that was directly sprayed.
Yeah.
Right. And
That's
if you visit the farm yourself, if you can talk to the farmer, if you can walk the orchards, then you know.
yeah.
And that's where we should be moving toward.
That's got to be so fulfilling and gratifying whenever you're selling your meat to somebody and they come back and tell you how great it was. And they give you these compliments and that you're providing a meal to the entire family. I feel that way whenever I if I get a deer or something and I share that meat with my family or friends. That I don't know what it is, but it's like a feeling that I can't get anywhere else. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it is. It is really gratifying. I work really, really, really hard to produce, especially the chicken. Chicken is very labor intense. I touch every one of those birds a lot of times, twice a day, hauling hundreds of pounds of feed and water out to them. And you can't buy this chicken in the grocery stores.
Mm-mm.
And for something, beef, let's take beef, for example. There are nutritional benefits to eating beef, whether that is feedlot beef or straight off my farm beef. And there are differences, but they are minuscule in the scheme of things. It's more important that you eat the beef, right? But with something like chicken or eggs or pork, my professional background says the conventionally raised stuff is a detriment to your health because of the potential toxicity and the fatty acid profiles and the dearth of the lack of nutrients relative to one raised the way that we raise them, using a certified organic feed on rotated pasture in the sunshine and fresh air in a low stress environment. All of the things add up to a product that is going to boost your health. And you can only get it on farms like ours. We're definitely not the only ones doing it, but in the scheme of things, we're a minority.
Yeah, I've heard that before, that the nutritional profile of a regenerative cow versus a conventional is those the differences are not very large compared to a chicken or a
Right.
pig.
Yeah, I think we're still learning. We are still learning what are all the things we should be looking for, right? If you just zoom out and say protein, fat, carbs, and you look at that, whether we're looking at a pastured egg versus a conventional egg or pastured beef versus conventional beef, chicken fat protein, they're going to be about the same across everything. But then you take a chicken fat protein, carbs fat protein. But then if you look at Let's look at the fatty acids themselves with the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. Okay, let's break that down further. But what if we look at what are the antioxidants? We can look at the minerals. The minerals are going to depend on the soil that they're being raised on or the feed that's in them. It's possible that feedlot grain-fed beef has a more robust mineral supplement built into it. And so maybe the level of selenium is going to be higher in that beef than one raised on selenium poor pasture if they're not being adequately supplemented with a free choice mineral. Maybe. But what about the other benefits that come from eating plants? And I think we're just starting to even know what to look for. There's some research that's happening. Results aren't out yet, but there may be other compounds that are beneficial. At this point, with the larger the animal, like with the ruminants, it's like you said, with beef, better to eat the beef than not eat the beef. With things like chicken and pork, it might be better not to eat it unless you can get it from a farm like ours.
Can you explain for folks that have never seen a regenerative chicken before, or even the egg, like what's the differences between a regenerative raised chicken, whole chicken, compared to a conventional one?
Yeah, well, if you're looking just at a whole chicken inside its shrink wrapped wrapper, they might look very similar depending on what breed the regenerative farm uses. So we raise Cornish cross chickens, which are the same breed that you get from a conventional farm. Going into this, we were told that those conventional breeds, those Cornish cross breeds, grow too fast for their legs to keep up. Their breasts get so big that they can't stand, their legs break. That has not been our experience at all. At 6 to 8 weeks, we usually go close to 8 weeks before we process, which is longer than the standard. Industry standard, I think, is 42 days.
Wow.
And at that 8-week point, when we go to collect them for processing, they can still outrun us. We have to do it at dusk when they're all settling down for the night if we're going to have any luck of catching them all. So management matters, for sure. But we raise the Cornish cross chicken at this time, which means that the muscles are about the same size and shape of the ones that you're used to getting in the grocery store. The fat will probably be more yellow on a pasture-raised chicken because it's eating more beta-carotene in the grass. The bones will probably be more dense. So if you put a conventional chicken in the slow cooker for 12 hours versus a pasture-raised chicken, you're going to end up with, in my experience, the one that has much mushier meat, much softer bones, a much less rich broth relative to the flavor and the texture of the pasture-raised bird. And then there's yet another chicken option, which is the stew hen, which is a retired layer, usually around 2 years old. They've had a lot of time to run around and eat bugs and grass and build muscle structure and build bone density. So if you really want a special eating experience and really good flavor and really high nutrition, that would be the kind of bird to get.
What about the egg yolks? I've seen that the egg yolks, compared, the two are a lot different from one another.
Yeah. So I had learned probably 15 years ago, you look for the bright orange yolks, and that's going to mean it has the better ratio. Fatty acids don't give yolks their colors, so that didn't make sense. But those golden yolks are what we were taught to look for, right?
Right.
The gold color of the yolks comes from the plant pigments that the chickens are eating. You can put those plant pigments into conventional feed, and they do.
Wow.
It can come from corn, it can come from alfalfa, it can come from marigolds, it can come from really any of those yellowy, orangey plants. So you can take a chicken and feed them a very poor feed with some yellow pigments in it and get a very golden yolk. That's not where it's at. And that feed can be laden with all of the pesticides, all of the fungicides, right? If all you're looking is at the color of the yolk, which we still do. People still talk about it. Our yolks change colors over the year. So in the spring and through the middle of summer, they become much richer because the grass is this bright green, lush, growing, right? Um, Midwinter, they're a little more pale because there's nothing fresh to eat.
Hmm.
The supposedly the French have recipes for eggs from different times of the year because the eggs behave differently. But when you have a pasture raised animal, you get seasonal variations. That's true of our lamb. A lamb harvested in the spring is going to have some oniony, garlicky flavors because that's what's growing. In the late summer, it's going to have sweeter flavors because of the wild carrot and some of the sweeter plants that they're eating. And that shows up in the chicken meat, that shows up in the eggs to a lesser degree flavor wise, but the consistency changes. Um, so from how it looks, I don't know if there's a huge difference. I don't know if you can trust the difference that you see with your eyes,
Yeah,
but you can taste the difference.
for sure.
And they cook up differently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about the whole when someone goes to the store, if they don't know a rancher or a regenerative rancher near them, there's a lot of different types of eggs now. There's cage free, there's pasture raised, there's organic raised. Like, what is your suggestion for folks that are going to the store to buy eggs? Like, what does all of that mean?
Honestly, the eggs was the thing that I was most excited to be able to stop buying with milk close behind because I hated going and standing in front of that refrigerator case and not trusting that the eggs that were, now this was 5 years ago, 3 years ago, the eggs that were $7.50 a dozen, not trusting that those really were any better than the ones that were $1.99.
Yeah.
And not having any way to verify that. So I think, again, it comes down to knowing your farm and your farmer. And I think there are more off-the-shelf options now where you can find their social media account, or you can go to their website, or you can track what farm it came from, and there's more transparency there. I don't know what the brands are offhand that are doing a good job, but I think that there are some.
Yeah.
And that would be the suggestion.
Yeah, your recommendation is local all the time, as much as possible.
As much as possible. If you can talk to the person who's growing it, or see pictures where you feel confident that you're seeing the true story.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. Are you familiar with Rome Ranch out here in Texas?
No.
They
Unless, is that
Forces of Nature.
nature?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we did a podcast with Taylor, and he gave us some crazy statistic that was pretty mind blowing. He said that 95 or was it 99% of Americans have never visited a farm. That's pretty
I
wild.
believe it.
That's wild.
I believe it. I had been to a dairy as a preschooler or a kindergartner, and I remember sitting out on the wall and eating a prepackaged ice cream bar that probably didn't actually even have any milk in it in retrospect. But that might have been my only farm visit until I became a farmer.
Wow. And
You drive past them.
right. And that's so cool that y'all are very similar in the way that he had no farming experience either. He just jumped in, him and his wife.
I don't know if I would be doing this the way that we are, if I had grown up in agriculture. Because I would have seen us doing the things that we were doing, and that's just what I would have kept doing. I'm not sure if I didn't come to this from a place of really caring about social justice and human health and environmental health, and the way that that was informed through growing up in Southern California, becoming a naturopathic doctor. I think I had to be removed from it and then come into it. And I don't have all the answers. I am not doing everything perfectly, but I get to stand on the shoulders of giants, of folks who have been doing this for much longer than I have, and borrow their systems and trust what they say, what they have developed over the decade or decades, and start there and experiment here to do my best to produce what I know is going to help preserve and create human health in a way that protects and improves our shared natural resources, builds our local economy, builds our local food security, builds community relationships, and is as kind as possible to animals.
Who are some of your heroes that inspire you in your daily work?
Oh, probably primarily my daily work is inspired by non-agriculture folks.
Hmm.
People like my great aunt who just passed last week, who was just a force of a woman who went out and did all kinds of things because no one ever told her that she couldn't. She became a medical doctor in the 1950s when women were not becoming doctors, and went to Iran to become a medical missionary, a woman in a Muslim country in the 1950s.
Wow.
And other female ancestors who did really cool things when faced with needing to find a creative solution to a problem of a husband being sent to a sanatorium with tuberculosis, and now she has to take care of all of her children. And how's she going to do it? She's going to put her jam into small little jars and sell them to the hotels.
That's all. That's wild.
This kind of thing, or even just my mom and the way that she showed up for us kids, um, and drawing on that for how I want to show up for my kids and for our customers. Agriculture side, the ones who are the most outspoken are the ones that it's easiest for me to glean from in the little pockets of time that I have for that. Greg Judy does a really good job managing his animals outside. Joel Salatin does a great job with educating the masses about the importance of local food production. And he was doing a lot of these processes before they were being talked about as regenerative. And I know that he's a divisive figure really on this planet. He's a divisive figure, but he's been telling stories for a very long time about how their land, when they moved in, had big granite, huge swaths of land that were granite. And over the time that they were farming, he watched the granite disappear as the topsoil grew. And they weren't calling it regenerative agriculture. He just told this story. And that is really what impressed upon me 15 years ago about what's possible. I know that's the direction we want to move in. So,
Yeah. Is it wild to think that what you're doing right now, you could inspire someone, just like how your heroes inspired you? You could, with your interactions that you have at, I don't know if you go to farmers markets or anything like that, but even people that come to your farm, you could be inspiring a future farmer. Is that wild to think about?
I hadn't ever thought about that.
No.
Yeah, that's the first time that that's crossed my radar.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that is cool. I know I am living a lot of people's dream, or what they think is their dream, because they tell me.
Yeah.
And I know that we are inspiring people's food choices. They've never used a whole chicken before. They've never made bone broth before. They've never considered that this part of the animal could be eaten, or that there's a benefit to cooking the meat on the bone or with the skin on, and doing that educational piece, which is so near and dear to my heart, because really I come to this from a human health standpoint, whether that's the health of the workers on both sides of it, right, or the neighbors of the farms that are not being sprayed, or the energetic imprint of the meat that's being consumed from a stressed versus a non-stressed animal. Wanting to have healthy people, that requires a healthy planet. I really do come to it from a human health standpoint, and I totally just lost my train of thought. Just being able to inspire people on their own health journeys, meeting them where they are, giving them the tools that they need, because I believe that our bodies want to be well. And in order for your body to be well, you have to remove whatever's in the way and give it the building blocks that it needs.
Yeah. Well, Karis, you're very inspirational, and I love everything that you're doing. I love the information that you're sharing across social media, and I think you're doing a very important thing for your community and people that follow you. How can people get in contact with you and follow your work?
We exist online at theoldroadfarm.com. The Instagram is at theoldroadfarm. I'm also Farmer Dr. Mom. Ooh, I should make sure I have that right. I think it's Farmer Dr. Mom is my more personal Instagram. Sometimes I cross-post on those by accident. That's indicative of my life.
Yeah.
Theoldroadfarm.com. We also have 2 farm stays on our farm. So folks are welcome to look us up on Airbnb or on Tentrr, which is Tentrr. So we have the spring house that I'm sitting in right now, with a little kitchenette and a shower, a full bathroom, but we also have a platform tent up on the top of the hill with a queen size bed and a beautiful view. So we love to have people come out to learn about farming, whether they're here and want to put on boots and get their hands in the mud and milk a cow and collect eggs, or they just want to have a peaceful place. We love having folks to the farm.
That's great. I can't wait to share this with people. I'm excited for everything that the future holds for you.
Well, likewise for you. You are up to some really, really cool stuff, and I appreciate the platform that you are giving the voices that are trying to do good things in this world.